As a reminder, this is the default layout of all panels in MATLAB. The command window is a powerful calculator that works and follows exactly the same rules as any calculator. But nothing here is helpful for coding. So the objective of this tutorial is to introduce the editor window where reusable code is written and saved, as well as introducing the concept of a variable. First, let's go over some general terms. Since we are about to write software, let's first understand that software is a list of instructions followed by the computer to solve a given problem. Unlike homework, writing software has a reusable aspect. There is no reason to write software if there is no objective to reuse the set of instructions later. Homework is mostly to practice, but a software is meant to be reused for different sets of inputs. Now keep in mind that there are two sides to software. The programmer is the person who writes the software. The user is the person who uses the software. Up till now, most of us have not coded and have been users of Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, or any kind of other software. This class is all about teaching you what's inside the software and writing code. As you develop the software, you will constantly jump back and forth between the two roles: programmer, user. If you don't like what you're seeing, you go back as a programmer. You change it, and you go back to the user. It's a constant back and forth. Now your goal is to make the user's life easy. Clear directions and units are critical in engineering. Make sure you give an example of an answer. For example, if you're expecting a time, should I type in 2? Should I type 14 for 2 o'clock? What do you type? What do you want? And there should, of course, be a clean presentation. Software is quickly abandoned or uninstalled if it is hard to use and hard to understand. For example, such direction as enter decimal is confusing. What for? Which one? We have so many. On the other hand, this description is clear. It states the context with a little story, and it even has clear directions and units. So always keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and write our very first software, one that solves the area of a triangle knowing the length of two sides and the angle in between. Following the steps, there are 3 givens and 1 find. The equation is rather straightforward, with half times based on height, the height being one side times the sine of the angle. There is no assumption for this straightforward problem. While we are not given numbers, it is essential to solve the problem, and at least once using numbers. This will be useful when the time comes to actually test our code. Remember, there were 7 steps, and we stopped at 7a. However, there is 7b and 7c. Computerizing the solution requires first to come up with an idea of the instructions we want to execute. Then it's all about programming and translating to code, but also testing. It is absolutely important to test and verify the results from the program. So choosing numbers such as 3, 5.2, and 30 is necessary for us to plug in the values and come up with an answer of 3.9. Hopefully, we get the same results once we code. Errors are made so easily. A simple swap between multiplication and division, they happen very quickly. The only way we know it didn't work is if our value on paper doesn't match the code. The algorithm is very straightforward. Define the sides and the angle, so give them values, and then calculate and display the area. Test your understanding. While this gives the correct value, did we actually create software? Absolutely not. Remember that none of these windows is helpful to write code. As soon as we shut off MATLAB right here, we have lost all of our information. Especially when you think about reusability here, it's very tedious to actually go in and change the numbers. Nothing here is practical to reuse. Think if you had to solve this for multiple sides and angle. Would you really enjoy going back in MATLAB and trying to tweak that equation? No. Now, before we go write MATLAB code, a new topic has to be introduced, and that is variables. The root word in variables is vary. In this problem, the variables are the sides, the angle, and the area. So each time we reuse the code, these values absolutely need to be able to change. Now, a variable is a name to a memory location. The data stored in that location, of course, can vary at any time. The memory of a computer is represented by zeros and ones mostly. The zeros and ones can be used for documents, maybe a book report, can be used for software installation, maybe MATLAB, but also and primarily is used to store data, such as a variable named base, or a variable in our case named side1. So let's finally go to MATLAB and write a reusable code for the area of a triangle. Let's first clear the old and wrong method. You can choose to type CLC or use the buttons at the top. This is new in version 2013. You've got clear the command window here, and you can also clear the workspace by typing clear in the command window or choosing to go with the option up here. This makes sure that all the zeros and ones that were previously used are freed up. They can be used again by some other software. Now, if none of these windows are useful to create code, we absolutely need a new one. This is where scripts come in handy. At the top left, you have a button for New Script. This new window is named the Editor. This is where we edit code. So far, our script is untitled. Just like Excel and Word, we will have to give it a name later on when we save it. The very first piece of information of any document is your name and your data. But this is a script. This is a list of instructions you want MATLAB to execute. So our name is obviously not of any interest to MATLAB. Suppose the student's name is Jotan. How can we make this invisible to MATLAB? This is where comments are introduced. Comments are information written within a program but ignored when the program runs. There are two ways to create them. At the top you can see comment. This is a %sign. Either by clicking here, MATLAB knows to put the %sign up front, or you can actually type it yourself. Now imagine you have more comments to write, such as maybe your section number, or the purpose of the code, such as solve area of triangle. There is another way to do comments for a block of lines. Instead of having a single %sign, we can do %curly open braces, skip a line, make sure to skip that line, and %close curly braces. This allows us to do what we call a comment block. Now, regardless what method you choose, MATLAB will ignore these lines when it runs the code. At this point, we're on 7b, so let's not forget that we did 7a. Those can be done as comment. Define sides and angle, calculate area, display. Now it's time to do the part B, translate into lines of code. The first thing you want to do though, between lines 6 and 8, is to clear your screen and clear your workspace. If you remember, this clears the command window. This deletes all variables in memory. It's like starting a homework. You start a blank sheet of paper with nothing already pre-done. Same thing in MATLAB. The very two lines that you want to see at top is to clear everything that's been done in the past. Now, dividing the signs and the angle. We had two sides. Side 1 was 3. Side 2 was 5.2. and the angle was 30. I have not introduced any units here. Just like in a calculator, you would not type units like cm or deg. If you want to indicate the units, they're solely for your purpose of reading. So this is centimeter, and this is degrees. Notice the use of comments throughout my code. As far as calculating the area and displaying, well, the area is half times side 1 times side 2 times the sine d of the angle. Now remember to use sine d since our angle is in degree. So here is our first reusable software. We have a description of the software at top. We have these two commands that help us clear everything that's been done in the past. We have defined our variables, and we have calculated our area. Now before we run this, we need to save the file. Notice it is still untitled, and it's actually pretty late. We should have saved it before. So we have a save button right here. The first thing you notice is that we are always going to end up in My Documents, MATLAB. This is not where you want to save your data. Always go back to your P drive, or if you're on your personal computer, to a folder dedicated to EGR115. Let's go quickly over the couple rules we need to follow in order to name a script file properly. First, no spaces. Use the underscore if needed. Second, no special characters. Third, it must start with a letter. It should be less than 63 characters. And last, no keyword MATLAB already knows. For example, CLC and clear are keywords. Do not name your own script file one of those. Specific to naming script files, do not use a variable name used in the script file itself. For example, we've used side 1, side 2, area. Those are words we can no longer use to name our script file. Specific to naming variables, try to avoid one-letters. Avoiding I and j is crucial since MATLAB is a calculator. I and j is the square root of -1. But avoiding single letter in general is useful. What is V, for example? In engineering, V stands for a lot of things, and eventually you'll lose track of which one. Also, a good advice is to represent the content. The list on the left gives us immediately an idea of what the file is about. Area of a square, volume of propellant, password protected, encryption. The list on the right, however, you have no clue. So always try to represent the content. Now let's go back to MATLAB. Since this is the area of a triangle, I will call it that. Area triangle. The file has been saved. So now let's execute and run this code. You will notice the button at top, Run, which is a similar green play button. Every time you run this script file, it actually also saves it. If you notice, MATLAB has one final step. Right now, MATLAB is in the MATLAB directory. It's in user Laurent95 document MATLAB. But my actual script file is saved on my desktop elsewhere. So MATLAB tells you, I need to do something. I cannot access your file unless I change directory. So go ahead and click Change Folder. And in the command window is the final result of our code. Side 1 is a 3, side 2 is a 5.2, the angle is 30 degrees, and the area got automatically calculated based on the variable names to be 3.9. We're happy since it matches the actual value we did on paper. On the right side, the workspace shows you every single variable in memory. The last thing we notice on this code is a bunch of underline here on the equal sign. If you hover with your cursor, it tells you what to do. Terminate the statement with a semicolon to suppress the output. In short, we have seen every single line that we coded. We did put a 4.8 in the variable side 1 and so on. Sometimes we might not care about this, so by putting a semicolon and running the code again, the huge difference is everything got hidden, except the area. I no longer have side 1, side 2, and angles shown here. Suppress the output using a semicolon. Since this had to be displayed, that is the purpose of our code so far, we did not put a semicolon at the end. And this concludes writing our first code in MATLAB. Now before we conclude, try it yourself. Pause the video and using the 7 steps, maybe 10 minutes at most, create software for the following problem. Give it a shot and see what steps are still not clear in your head. Make sure to write down any questions you have for class. Here are the key points. The editor window allows us to create script files. What are script files? They are allowing us to reuse sets of commands. The name of the file is specific, but keep it simple and representing the content. Single %sign creates single line comment. % curly brace creates a comment block, but make sure the curly brace are on their own separate line, just like we showed. The command CLC and clear are always placed at the top of your code. That way, every time you run, it's a clean command window. Writing equations, only everything on the right side is known, whether they're variable or actual values. The 1/2 was in actual values, but side 1, side 2 were actually known. Variables are case sensitive. Base versus capital base versus fully capital base is very different and would not allow your code to work. So keep all this in mind. As far as vocabulary, we learned software, programmer versus user, editor window, script file, and comments.